Welcome everyone back to Teaching Jobs Korea, and today I have a special episode. And to first start off, I would just like to say thank you for everyone supporting and watching our channel. We have reached 100 subscribers, and I promise that we'll try to come out with more videos that will be informative to help you in your job search. And today's video, I have invited a special guest today, a great teacher who I had the pleasure to meet and work with last year. And I just asked her to join us today so that she can share her experience as an English teacher, living in Korea as an English teacher as well. And I want you to introduce everyone to teacher Fajr.
Hi, so my name is Fajr. I've been a teacher in Korea for about 3-something odd years. I currently live in Pyeongtaek. I'm teaching at a hakwon, and what can I say? I'm excited to be here. I'm from New Jersey, the New Jersey, New York area. Well, you guys know the US, so.
I could kind of get that vibe. You have the East Coast vibe.
Yes, I'm very, very East Coast energy, but I'll tone it down for today.
I guess, where are you currently staying in? What area?
Currently I'm in the Gyeonggi-do province in Pyeongtaek.
And then I know that you stayed in the Jeonju area, right?
Yes, so before I came to Pyeongtaek, I was in Jeollabuk-do province for 3 years in Jeonju. I taught high school.
Jeonju is like a smaller area, and then, Pyeongtaek is not a bigger area, but I would say it's a little bit more developed, right?
I would say, we can attest that to the American military.
Right.
But a lot of Koreans like to call Jeonju 시골, like countryside, but I don't think it is. I think it's a good blend of both country and city, because there obviously are beautiful places like Moaksan, but then you also have fun stuff to do for the younger crowd. So.
Right. I guess when you first came out to teach in Korea, I guess how did you go about finding your job? And I guess what first made you interested in even coming out here?
So I was already teaching English, specifically IB, NYP English for high schoolers in America. Yeah. At the time I was working in Mississippi, which Mississippi, and then
MISSISS.
Yeah. Very, very different places. I was coming up on the end of my time with my school, and I was trying to figure out what my next steps were gonna look like.
Yeah.
I was super duper curious. This is peak Corona, about what living abroad would look like, just because, it gets boring in America sometimes. So I was, interestingly enough, on TikTok scrolling, and I saw people talking about teaching abroad when the algorithm works hard. So I was like, what countries are hiring English teachers now with my qualifications? And I ended up landing on Korea as the country I wanted to come to.
I guess how did you go about looking for your first job?
So through that process, deciding I wanted to come to Korea, I joined EPIC. I applied through the EPIC website, which is the English program in Korea, who hires teachers to work as native English teachers in public schools.
I guess when you applied through the EPIC program, because most of the schools that I work with are hakwons, right?
Yeah.
But I do know about EPIC. I guess, is it a very long process, and is it kind of hard to get into?
Yes. So it's pretty intense. I wouldn't say that it's hard, but they do have very strict requirements and qualifications that you need to meet. I was lucky enough to have met all of those qualifications, so it wasn't that hard of a process for me, but there are several interviews, there's a lot of documentation that needs to get done, but most of it's just clerical work that you'd have to do whether you were going to public or private school.
Okay. Did they tell you what location you were going to get placed in, or was it kind of
No, I feel that was the most fun part of it. I know I'm not trying to promote them, but that was the most fun part for me. I'm a bit of a spontaneous person, and I feel at that point in my life, I was ready to go wherever. I love the beach, so I really wanted to get placed in Busan, but I found out that I got placed in Jeonju. I was disappointed, but then when I got there, I was the farthest thing from disappointed. It was great.
Because I'm sure you visited a lot of bigger cities too, like Seoul, Busan. Big difference, right?
Giant difference. I'm not a fan of Seoul. I know this is hot take, controversial, sorry. But I know a lot of foreigners come to Korea and they're oh, I'll work wherever the first year. And then the ultimate goal is I'm gonna go to Seoul and work in a hakwon in Seoul. I've never had that desire. I think Seoul has way too many people, and it gives me anxiety. I'd rather have a place, I'm from a giant city, right? So for me, I'd rather just have a place where it's a little bit quiet, but if I want to do something fun, I can.
But I think a lot of teachers too, the reason why they're looking for bigger cities too is just the connection, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a misconception that even smaller other cities outside of Seoul and Busan, they think it's rural area.
Yeah. It's not.
Right? They have their own little section of development in each city.
100%. So in Jeonju specifically, it's called Eco City. That's like the more high-tech developed. They call it New City in Jeonju. But I think Jeonju as a whole, if you have that like ability to adapt to where you are, you will have no problem building that community and like making friends and getting close to people. You just need to be able to adapt.
I guess in terms of adapting, I guess when you first came out to Korea, what were some of like the hardest things that you kind of had to, I guess, adjust to? Like surprises, no matter how much you like prepare for moving to another country, right? I think there's always going to be like culture shocks, maybe the way of people's mindsets, just kind of transportation, getting around, language barriers definitely, right?
So I think there weren't any things that I would specifically say were hard. I knew that there were things that I needed to adapt to when I got here. I did not speak any Korean.
And she speaks Korean better than I do.
That's not true. I did not speak any Korean when I got here, none. 네, 안녕하세요, 감사합니다. So I think my biggest struggle was the otherness of being a native English teacher. A lot of people that don't speak the language aren't part of those conversations, and so a lot of conversations about me were happening in front of me, and I didn't even know like how to respond or what to say, and I'd always be a moment late waiting for a bilingual teacher to translate, or waiting for some nervous Korean teacher to be like, can you sign this? And so I always felt like 부담, a burden that like it would be, if I don't learn Korean or if I don't try to like engage with these people, I'm not gonna have the experience that I wanna have. And it really drove me in that second year to learn Korean. And I am self-taught, so I'm lacking 100%. But now that I'm able to communicate with Koreans on a basic conversational level, I see that there were a lot of things that I missed out on that first year that had I been able to speak Korean, it would have been a completely different experience.
I guess how long have you been studying Korean now?
So now, I've been here 3 odd years. That first year, I was fighting for my life. So I want to say 2-ish years of speaking Korean and studying
you've
Korean.
gotten very good in a very short amount of time.
I like languages though. I speak like 4 or 5 other ones.
I guess to teachers that are coming out for the first time, do you suggest to them at least try to get somewhat familiar with like the basic language of...
Please, you will not make friends if you don't speak at least conversational Korean. And Koreans are so positive with their reinforcement of you learning their language, right? Because like you'll say, 안녕하세요, and they're like, oh, wow, 한국 되게 잘하시네요, right? Everyone's like, wow, you're so good at Korean, oh my gosh. And you're like, all I said was hello.
I think when you first told me that, when you started to like speak Korean to me a little bit, I think one thing that I like, the way that I took it was I was very appreciative that you actually took the time to kind of, immerse yourself into the culture. And I could just tell that, just by doing that, I think you kind of understand the country better. And I think just you're able to navigate through a lot of different things and places that a lot of foreigners aren't able to because, there isn't that language barrier.
Yeah.
You can kind of get around. So yeah, I just wanted to let you know that I did appreciate, you taking the time.
I'm glad. I think for me, the biggest thing is that desire. So like I've taught in other countries as well, and I've spoken their language, and that relief that like washes over their face when they're like, oh, this person understands me. I think for me, that's the most important goal and my driving force when I'm learning a language. So if you are coming to Korea and you want to make friends, please make sure you learn at least conversational Korean, please. Don't come here, don't be like me and just come on vibes. Please learn Korean.
Good, great tips. And then I guess when you first started, you started off in a public school. I guess what was it like just kind of starting teaching, right? Obviously you had teaching experience a little bit in the States, but I think it is a bit different in Korea, especially with the kids and I think understanding the kids, right?
Yeah.
What was like the hardest thing like adapting to like your classroom?
I think in my classroom in the public school, especially because I was there for 3 years, I got to see how I changed in the 3 years, and then I got to see how my kids changed in the 3 years. I had the same group of kids for 3 years, from their freshman to third grade, and it was probably one of the most educating experiences of my life.
Right.
Just because in America, like we're very big on eye contact. Like that's a very big sign of respect. I'm listening to you, like I'm here with you. But in Korea, it's kind of perceived as like you being defiant or like being rude.
It depends on the situation too. Right?
But like mostly as a teacher, like talking to a student, normally like if a kid does something wrong and you're like talking to them like, hey, you did this wrong, they won't look at you, they'll look down.
Right, that is true.
It's like to show respect, like, yes, I'm listening to you and I understand that what I did was wrong. But when I first got here, it like drove me crazy because I'm like, I'm talking to this person and they're not looking at me. Do they understand what I'm saying? So I felt like that was one of my biggest like cultural struggles. But just being American, I think one of the things that I found the most entertaining, especially teaching teenage boys in Korea, was they're so curious. Like they think the dramas and the movies they watch on Netflix and like all these other shows are like real. So they'll be like, oh, teacher, did you go to house parties in college? And did you drink when you were a teenager? And did you do drugs? And did you shoot a gun? And I'm like, guys, like...
A very candid question.
I mean, yeah, and don't get me wrong. We love honesty in a classroom. But I think how media has shaped what Korean students perceive as reality for foreigners is kind of crazy. Just because I'm like, I wish I could take you with me to the States so you could see that what you're watching on these shows is not real, right?
I would say when you compare like Korean students to like American students, what would be like the biggest kind of difference?
There's none.
None?
The language, that's it. I taught in Peru, I've taught in Korea and America. All teenagers across the world are the same. They all want to be unique and individual. The only thing that changes is culture and language, right? But it's the same attitude in different fonts, all of them. It's so interesting. Yeah,
I think I can see where you're, especially with teenagers. I think with kinder, I guess you taught kinder too. Yeah, it's a little bit, I think, different at that age, right?
Very different.
Right.
Aegyo is such a big thing in Korea. I have a student who's half American, half Korean, and his dad, who's American, does not like when his daughter does aegyo.
Right.
But the mom is like, oh, it's so cute. What do you mean? So that cultural difference for me, I'm like, I get the not liking aegyo thing kind of just because I'm American, but as a woman teaching, I'm like, this is so cute. Oh, we love to see it. Yeah.
I guess spending time in Korea now for the past 3 years, I guess how would you say it's very different country compared to the States? I guess what are some some of the pros and cons of living in Korea compared to the States?
Okay, I'll start with the pros.
Okay, let's start with
Or do you want the cons first?
Whichever one's still.
If I start with the cons, we can soften the blow with the pros. So anytime, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, anytime there's a miscommunication between a foreigner and a Korean, 99.9% of the time, they're gonna say, it's a cultural difference.
Right.
Tell me that has not happened to you. It's so awkward because I'm like, this is not cultural. This is a person to person thing. There's just a miscommunication happening between.
No, but there is a slight cultural difference.
I mean, I understand that, but I think...
And I think it also depends on what type of relationship it is. Meaning that if it's in a professional setting, if it's two friends, right? I think when it's two friends, it's a little bit more just relaxed, right? And you just kind of match to, you just match to,
energy,
you know what I mean? I think in a professional setting, I think there is a certain Korean work culture, and they have a certain way of how their superiors were to them. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think culture does kind of play into that, but I also understand your point of view too, that when you're dealing with people, and especially adults in a professional manner, there's some things that should be kept professional, which, right?
Yeah. I think Korea also puts a lot of weight on age. That kondae culture is crazy. People very much if you're younger than me, I'm more important than you, you have to listen to me. Whereas in America, that work culture specifically is I might be younger than you, but I could be holding a higher position than you. It's not that big of a deal in the States, whereas here it's very we have to promote by age, we have to follow these things. I'm older than you, you must respect me.
So I think there is a little bit of hierarchy in Korea, right? And I think that's just inevitable with the history of Korea and just kind of the way that...
Yeah, I mean, I understand. And that's why I think it's very important to understand the culture of Korea before you do come, just as a way to understand how to immerse yourself into it as well.
I guess when you first came out here though, and just kind of living out here, I guess, how were the Korean people to you? The people that you meet, were they very kind for the most part, helpful?
Being from the East Coast, staring is probably one of the hardest, my biggest struggle. In New York,
right,
in New Jersey,
right,
if people stare at you, they want to fight. Like there's a beef there. And for the longest time, like I had to unlearn that because I was like, I'm not in America. This person doesn't have a problem with me. I'm probably the first foreigner they've ever seen. 1, 2, probably the first foreigner they've ever seen that looks like this, right? So, I mean, I have gigantic hair. I don't look like, you know, what they imagine. I appreciate that. Like smooth with the compliments, you know? But also just not what they see portrayed in media a lot, right? So I think the staring for me was hard, but like I said earlier, if you speak Korean, they're very nice to you.
right.
Otherwise, they're super anxious. They're like, I'm sorry, I don't speak English. But if you speak Korean, it's this whole new persona that comes out, which is why I'm like, you should learn Korean. It's so interesting and so important, I think.
The whole thing about the staring thing too, right? Even for me, even as a kyopo, right?
Yeah.
Even if the moment that I speak Korean or the moment that I speak English is when I start getting stares. And I think it's just something that's out of the blue, something that they're not used to seeing. So it's just kind of intriguing, interesting, right?
Also, your hairstyle is not common in Korea either. There's no Koreans that want to let their hair go. They're like, no, I'm gonna hold on to this until I die.
Just gotta work with what I have.
It looks good.
Thank you. What about the Korean food? I get, spicy food. Was it okay adapting to that?
Korean food, to me, I don't know about y'all, to me, Korean food is not spicy. I'm sorry. I've had too many other cuisines to think Korean food is spicy.
Did you have the tteokbokki like 4단계?
I've had maratang 4th level, 불닭볶음면, 닭발. I've eaten all of these things.
He's more Korean than I am.
Listen, they're not spicy to me. There's other foods that I'm like fighting for my life, but Koreans, they're so worried, right? When a foreigner's like trying something that they think is spicy for the first time. 매워, 조심해. I'm like, it's okay. I'm fine. Yeah, but I think now, because I've lived here for 3 years, I can cook Korean food better than I can cook Moroccan food, Egyptian food, or like any American foods.
Wow, so you even like learned how to cook the food?
Yeah, I mean, I had to, right? Like, so I can't eat pork. And like Koreans, you guys love pork.
We do love pork.
And so there's foods that I wanted to try. Like, I love jjajangmyeon. I love jjajangmyeon.
You know how to make jjajang?
Yes, I do. And jjajangbap. Because that's how badly I wanted to try it, that I like went home and was like, I'm gonna learn how to make this without pork in it. And so I use samgyeop to fry the black bean curd instead of samgyeopsal.
I have no idea what she's talking about because I don't know how to cook, but it sounds like she's making jjajangmyeon.
Oh yeah, it's really good. It's really good.
I was gonna ask you, like, when you leave, if you would miss any Korean foods, but you could just cook it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I'll miss it just because like the ingredients aren't gonna be the same. Just as a heads up, another con: fruits and vegetables in Korea are expensive.
Yeah,
they're super duper expensive. They're so expensive that people give them as gifts for Chuseok, Solal, like just. A heads up, so make sure you're like getting multivitamins or something, cause.
But everything else is kind of cheaper, right?
Yeah, I mean the staple stuff. So like 간장, soy sauce, rice, garlic, gochujang, gochugaru, sesame oil. Those are all like the very like spring onion. Those are all cheap because those are Korean household staples. If you don't have those, you can't eat, right?
Right.
But fruits and vegetables are a luxury, so prepare for that.
Would you say that things are a little bit more expensive in the States compared to like Korea in terms of, I guess, just overall products? Cost?
Food specifically, clothes, or like cost of living?
I guess cost of living.
Cost of living, I feel like it's similar.
Really?
Yeah. I think what you do for work and what you have to pay for rent, it like matches in the States or like is super duper different. But in Korea, it's like, okay, I work and make this much every month and then my rent is this much. Well, if you're an English teacher, you're not really paying rent unless you get your own place.
Right.
But my rent is this much and I have to pay this much for other things as well. So I think it matches. It's cheaper a little bit, but it matches.
You're making less in Korea in terms of overall salary, but then the cost of living to match that, it's pretty comparable to, the States, right?
Exactly.
Insurance and rent and whatnot. I guess working at both like a public school, and I'm pretty sure the audience is going to be curious about this, right? Both working at a public school and then working at a hakwon. I would say, what are your thoughts on both type of positions?
Okay, I can start with public school pros for me. Job stability.
Right.
Like you're locked in. You're technically like a government employee if you go in through a program like Epic. So you're locked in with that job unless you do something crazy to like break your contract, right? Which is a big deal, especially for people moving abroad for the first time. Job stability. Also, it follows the national curriculum for the most part. So your lesson planning is a little bit more easy in terms of you don't need to think too much. I was the type of person who liked to go above and beyond and like make my classes more fun and relatable to the kids, just because if you follow what you get, it's kind of boring. But if you make it more engaging, then the class is more engaging. But definitely more structured and straightforward because it follows the national curriculum, which we love to see. Great benefits.
Yeah, definitely a lot
Great
of perks.
benefits.
Vacation time, right?
Public schools, you get off for every single red day, unless you have a weird school. But yes, you get every single red day off, which is fantastic. Hakwons.
Well, on top of that, you get like 8 weeks vacation too in total. So yeah, there's a lot of perks.
Aren't you supposed to be promoting private schools? You're over here.
Well, I mean, I'm just here to provide information about both, right? And I think both of them do have their, separate pros and cons, definitely, right?
Yes. Cons though for public schools, the classroom numbers, your classroom size is crazy. Like I had 30 kids in a class and I had 16 classes a week.
Yeah.
Which, hello, I'm not good at math, but I don't need to do math. I'm an English teacher. 30 kids in a class, 16 classes a week. I was lost. Granted, I was already exposed to it in the context of like Mississippi and like American overcrowded classrooms and stuff like that. But that paired with adjusting to Korean culture when I first got here was rough.
Would you say with like the big classroom size that you see a big fluctuation in terms of proficiency levels,
Range
right?
Is crazy. Like you have kids that are like on native levels, and you have kids that don't even know the alphabet.
I guess as a teacher, do you feel like you were kind of fulfilling your role? I get a lot of teachers sometimes when they transition over from public school to private school, is that they don't really feel the fulfillment of a teacher because they're not feeling like the progression. It's like half, right? You see kids that are like way advanced and the lesson is too easy for them, or you see the ones that are struggling, and then maybe you see that in the ones that you kind of help in the struggling part of it. So they kind of go for a smaller classroom, which is why they transition over
to Hakwons.
Right.
I mean, yeah, that's a pro for Hakwons, that the classroom sizes are definitely smaller. What I will say is I tried my best with my kids. I wanted to like differentiate the learning for them in that regard. Like I knew that there was such a big gap that I needed to have days where I could make the kids that weren't performing where they needed to be feel good. So like playing English language games or like doing things that everyone could be involved in so that they could be like, okay. And that's another thing. That's why I feel like just following the national curriculum, not fun or not enough. Like you need to supplement it. So for English language games, you can make it relevant to what's happening in Korea now. And even the kids who don't speak English well will like know what you're talking about, because those are the kids that are always on their phones or like always locked into what's happening in pop culture and stuff like that. So
I guess with the public school sector too, because you get like randomly placed, right? I guess if you don't want to be like in a smaller city and location is very important, then probably public school wouldn't be right.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a good fit. Definitely. You need to know who you are before you make the decision between public and private school. I know who I am, and I knew that if I got put in a place that was in the middle of nowhere, I would be okay, just because like I like to call myself a chameleon and that I can like
You're
adapt.
A survivor.
Yeah, I can adapt to any situation. But there are people who like lush, comfortable lives and they want to go to what they know, and I respect that. More power to you. But know who you are before you make the decision between private and public.
I guess that would be the compromise of being a little bit more specific on location preference. Also timeline too, because public schools only hire 2 times of the year, right? So any other time outside of those 2 times, you're probably gonna have to aim for like a Hagwon position, right?
For sure.
I think in a Hagwon position, it's definitely a smaller classes. I would say that students are more attentive in the class.
Yeah, their parents are paying a lot of money for them to.
But I would say it's very competitive.
Oof. And that was actually one of the things that I jotted down when I was thinking about the pros and cons of Hagwons. So it's super competitive. Kids have like beef with each other because they want to be the best. They want to be better than everyone else. That and like pressure from parents.
Yeah.
I have a native English teacher friend who was telling me that he has students who have literally gray hairs. They haven't even hit puberty yet, who have gray hairs from like how stressed they are for needing to like perform well academically. And like that goes back to like Korean history and like wanting to be the best and come back from like all this hardship and stuff like that with all the wars and that whole whatever. But that work ethic is so strong and it carries it with them their whole lives.
You know what the main reason for that is though?
What?
Because Korea is such a small country, and it's like everybody wants to move to Seoul and eventually work in Seoul, so it's like a race to that, right, basically.
So if you contact my friend here and say, I want to work in Seoul, please bear in mind that there are a gajillion other people who also want to work in Seoul.
But I can still help you out.
He can.
Right.
He can, he's the best. But just make sure you're aware. Yeah. That and less flexibility, I think, for hakwons in regards to content. They have books that like they get from their headquarters. If they're a franchise, you have to teach those books. They need to be done in a certain time period. And at the end of the day, hakwons are businesses,
right,
and not schools. They're not schools. A lot of people get confused about that. They're tutoring facilities, like more academic support, but they're not schools, they're businesses, and your managers and owners will remind you of all of that.
But here's the twist part of that, right? Is that they get better education in a hagwon compared to the public schools. And I always disagreed with that too. Like I think that system is unproductive.
It's not fair.
Like they should make the public schools with better teachers and make it more efficient so that hagwons could get decreased. Of course, it's not good for my business, but just speaking in terms of like education and working in education, what I think is actually productive for the students, I think that would be the best route. But hey, you know, we live in the country. We can't.
I mean, I definitely agree. I agree. I think it boils down to making sure that people are aware of what they're getting into with hakwons. Your kids, obviously it's a smaller classroom, so you can give more individualized attention to kids and like what they need. Whereas if you have a class of 30 kids, you can't walk around for 45 minutes and give every single kid the same amount of attention.
That's true. And just moving on to, you know, my next question is, I guess for teachers that are coming out for the first time, right? I guess what are some like important suggestions that you can kind of give them to kind of help them, you know, have a smooth transition into the country?
I think I'll give you 3. 1, make sure you do your research, right?
Yeah.
Vet your recruiters.
Right.
Get good recruiters, people that are able to communicate with you and understand what you want, right? Do your due diligence, use good job boards that are gonna help you, like reputable job boards that are gonna help you find something that you like, and talk to other teachers, because those are the people that are gonna give you the facts. Make sure you talk to other teachers. 2, document everything. Anything that you sign your name on, ask for a copy of it, even if it's in Korean. Document everything. Read your contracts carefully. Look at things like your contract termination clauses, your salary, the start date, your housing. Make sure you pay attention to all of that. Oh, and the last thing, stay flexible. I know a lot of people come with the intention of like, oh, Kevin, can you put me in Seoul? And then you're like, I can try, but you're gonna have to compromise on other things. Be flexible. If it's your first year, don't be so rigid on like what you want from Korea, because you'd be surprised. Like I said, I applied to Busan and got put in Jeonju, which worlds apart, but I had the time of my life and I made lifelong friends there who I still contact to this day, people who've left Korea. So please, 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 those are the 3. Stay flexible, do your due diligence, and make sure you document everything. Those are the 3 things that I would recommend for first time coming.
Very good suggestions. And I think the reason why you actually liked your experience in Jeonju is not because of the location, but I think the compatibility of the job that you're doing with the students. And then also just kind of, you know, Jeonju is like a very family, like it's like people are very friendly.
Jeollabuk-do is the kindest province in Korea. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It's lies.
And then finally, I guess, you know, there's a lot of generalization and perception of, you know, hagwons, schools, and, you know, recruiters. And I know that can kind of get very generalized. And I think that's the biggest problem in the market, is like people just like to generalize based on, I guess, someone else's experience, or maybe something might have happened to you, right? But from my experience of just working in this industry, it's a very personalized service, right? And I think every individual has their similarities of what they're looking for.
Right.
But then also there's, you know, the unique differences where I kind of pay attention to, right? And I think it's where the unique differences of where you kind of see the differences of, I guess, some people's experiences. Right. I guess what about you?
I don't think I've ever told you this. So before we met,
Yeah.
I had like put in a group in for like Jeonju, and I was like asking about if people could recommend recruiters, and they ended up recommending someone, and he like got angry at me because I turned down the position.
Right.
After the interview. I mean, it didn't go well. I felt like the person was unorganized and I was interviewing her.
Right.
So I just messaged him politely and was like, I don't think it's a good fit. But I appreciate your time. Like, please let them know I'm not interested. And he got angry and like bombarded me with emails saying like, yeah, it was terrifying. But yeah, I've heard the horror stories about it. And I feel like that my situation wasn't that bad. I've heard worse. Also just with hakwons and people having to run away in the middle of the night and stuff like that.
Right.
It just goes back to what I said about like doing your due diligence. Understand who you are before you come to Korea. Before you choose between a public and private, before you find your recruiter, you need to know what it is you want to get out of this experience. If you're here for the wrong reasons, if you're here to chase your career, your K-pop idol around or go clubbing, like you need to know that you're also here to teach the youth of Korea. So you need to know what you want to get out of the experience. You're gonna have a hard time if those are your goals. But finding a recruiter who can like support you and communicate with you, I feel like I was a very particular, you can be honest, I was a very particular.
She was very particular, but you weren't you were picky, right?
Yeah.
But you I think it's more about you were confident in knowing what you wanted and what you were looking for in that transition, right?
Yeah.
And that's definitely fine, but you were definitely open-minded.
Yeah. And so it's within bounds, right? You should be flexible, but also know what it is you want. Don't be super duper rigid, because then you're gonna end up getting nothing. So just make sure you know what you want when you come to Korea, and make sure you're talking to your recruiter. If you do decide to go the private route, if you go the public route, just be confident. If you get put in the countryside, it's not that bad, I promise.
It's not that bad.
It really,
But some areas are kind of
not true. I love this. The countryside in Korea is beautiful. I feel like people are haters.
But you know, the country's very small too, so you can I bet you've probably seen all of Korea so far, right?
I've seen a bunch of cities. There's other places I want to go.
Where's your favorite place?
Gyeongnyong.
Dongyong?
Yes, it's all the way in the south of Korea, near Koje, like past Busan, past Ulsan. They call it the Maldives of Korea. I went during like not peak season. I went in the winter.
Yeah.
I loved it. I regret nothing. I want to go back before I leave. I think it's fantastic.
I've been there. I stopped by there on the way to Koje. But they have like that fish market.
Yeah, the hae is so good. It's not a joke. Nobody knows how to eat and drink like the old people of Korea.
You have to let them know what hae is.
Oh, hae is sashimi, guys. It's sushi without rice.
Did you think that did you eat like sushi in the States?
I mean, like, I was a California roll girly. I never thought I'd eat sashimi, like, or raw fish, period.
Right.
But it got to the point where I was eating sangnakji. It's the
moving squid.
Yeah, the moving squid that like it's so good. I had it by myself in Busan.
It is good though.
And she gave it to me as service with my kwango hae, which is flounder sashimi, which was amazing. My favorite kind, that and salmon. But yeah. It's so good. You can have like new experiences. You just need to be confident. It doesn't all have to be going out or like going to Seoul. There's other things to do in Korea.
Yeah, and we've been talking for a long time, so I think we gotta wrap this up. Otherwise, people are just gonna tune off.
Sorry.
But Basher, thank you very much for joining us today. I know, it's like 30 minutes went by.
It's giving good chemistry. I feel like we were able to have a very natural conversation.
I think so too. But thank you again for joining us today, and I hope you enjoyed our episode. And please give a warm round of applause for Teacher Fajr.
Thank you.
And please make sure to subscribe and like if you like the content, and we'll be back with more videos. Thank you.